Hello everyone, welcome back to another lecture on the course Python Fundamentals Building Blocks for Aspiring Developers. We will start the 10th module, which is also our last module, and we will do a final project in this one. So for our agenda, we only have one day on this one where we will create a small project using the concepts that we have learned. And now the final project. Let's begin. So what we're trying to do is that we're trying to develop a program in Python which will allow us to see the most popular GitHub repositories for different programming languages. Python, JavaScript, Java, any of those. And then we will save the information of those repositories in a file, in a CSV file. We can save name, URL, their description, their stars, and these sort of things. In this one, we will use some basic Python knowledge as well as some more advanced skills such as OOP and APIs and things like that. And for this, we will use the API that GitHub provides us to search different projects. And these are the steps, just the rough steps that we will follow. So first, we need a GitHub API endpoint, and that is free, so we do not need an API key or any sign-in, or we do not even need to create an account. Then we will have a menu which will allow the user to input the language they want to search for. Then we'll download the data from the API. Then we'll extract the information required, save it in a CSV file, and test the program. So let's begin. First, you want to open up VS Code. So yeah, so this is we have. Let me delete some previous ones. Okay, so I already have a new file called module.py, module10.py. So the first thing, since we're going to make a request, I'm going to import the requests module. We'll also be writing a CSV file, so I'm going to import the CSV module. Another one that I'm going to import is datetime. So what it does is that it allows us to convert datetime formats and deal with them efficiently. Now I will use a couple of things that we can do without them, but since it's a complete project, it's better to include them. So first I'm going to create a class and I'm going to say it repository, that is one repository, and then I'm going to define the constructor method. So in here I'm going to define the things or the attributes that I'm going to save. So what I'm going to save is name, the URL, the stars, the description, the owner, and finally the created at. So if you do not know about GitHub is basically, so if you can type GitHub, so GitHub is basically where we can have a lot of repositories. You can sign in, save your code over here, these sort of things, right? You can even search for projects. I can say GitHub projects. So these are project list, all these sort of things. A lot of people have created projects and they share these projects over here so other people can use it. You can then use their projects, use their code, raise issues, modify their code, and things like that. So let's go back. So now first let's say self.name is equals to name, self.url is equals to URL, self.stars is equals to stars, self.description is equals to description, self.honor. I'll just create all the attributes that we need. So self.created at is equals to created at, right? Now we have the constructor method, and now I want to create another method which converts this all into a list, right? So I'm going to say define to list, and in this one we need the self. And now I'm going to say simply return and put everything in the list. So I'm going to say self.name, self.url, self.stars, self.description, self.owner, and finally self.created at, right? Now, one thing that I want to tell you guys is to comment your code efficiently. So let's see how we can do it, which is the with the good naming convention. So a good convention is that we use three quotes, double quotes, and here you write the description of whatever you're doing. In this case, we have a class. I'm going to say represents a GitHub repository, right? Now we can write. Now similarly, we can also do it with the functions. That's up to you. But to make the code better, we're going to write some over here. So I'm going to say returns repository information as a list, right? So now we can save the information over here and return it as a list, right? Now the next one we're going to do is create another class, and that would be the API that will allow us to make the calls. So again, I'm going to comment over here so I know afterwards, and when I share with someone this code, they will know what it is. So I'm going to say provides methods to interact with the GitHub API, right? So we will make the call using this class. We will not make the call directly. Now again, we can do it without the class. We can simply make a call, but it's better to make your code more modular so you can reuse the code again and again, right? So now the first thing I need to do is create a function. So I'm going to say define fetch ending repositories, right? Repositories. So I do not need a constructor for this one, so I'm not going to have any constructor. So here to fetch this one, first let me write down the URL so you know what we are trying to do. So I'm going to say URL is equals to I'm going to put this F because I'm going to format the script. So this is the API dot github dot com, then slash we are going to use the search API and repositories, and then we have the query. So we're going to say q is equals to language is equals to what language we're going to use. We're going to give it as an input that is from the user. Now this is the programming language that we are going to use, and then we're going to say and sort. So we are also going to sort it based on the stars because we want the most popular ones at the top. So we are going to sort it by the stars. So stars basically are that if someone is using a repository, they can leave a star that kind of acknowledges the repository that it is good. So the more stars it has means that more people have used it and liked it. So it's kind of a statistic that we can use to see how popular a repository is. So next, we're also gonna say order, and I'm going to say order is equals to description, and we're going to divide it by page, and we're going to say this page, and then also going to say that how much we want per page. So I'm going to say per page, and okay, and then I'm going to say how much is per page. So I'll write per page, and we forgot this equal to over here. So let's just quickly check out if everything is correct. Yes, everything seems correct. So now we know what we're going to use. So first we need a language over here. So and we also need a page to begin from, and we also need a per page value, so it is going to be 10. So we're just going to limit, 10 results per page. And we can also even say that the default language can be Python, right? I'm going to say Python. Now if a person changes the language, it will be changed, and we already learned about this, how we can do default values. So now once I have it, I need to make a call. So I'm going to do that in a try response, in a try catch, because if there's an error, we can catch it more gracefully. So I'm going to say response is equals to requests dot get, and now in here I'll put the URL, and now response dot trace for status. So what it does now, this is a new function. So what it does is that if there is some uh, error, this sort of thing, then it will raise a exception. So we can also raise exceptions by ourselves, based on some conditions. So if there's an error, maybe the depositor is not fetched correctly, or there is some other thing, we can simply raise an error over here, right? So now if there is no error, I'm going to say data is equals to response.json. So I have this converted into JSON, and then I can simply say return, or I can say print data, um, and let's say accept requests dot exceptions dot request exception. So if there's an exception, then we are going to do that exception. So this part over here uses the exception if it is raised here. So it automatically looks by itself that if the status code is not 200, then there should be an exception. And then it raises an exception that, okay, now we need to go over an exception. We have an exception, we have an error. And once it raises that, this piece of code is executed, right? So now what we have to do is that we have to handle the error. So what we can do, we can simply print the error. Okay, so we can say print error fetching data, and then we can simply put in the error as well, e. So this e here stores the value of error. We might have done it a bit differently in the lectures, but this is also another way to deal with errors. If we do not know exactly what the error we are after, we can just raise an exception and print the error as it is over here. And then I'm going to say return, or print, yeah. So like this. So now let's see if we can quickly test this. So first I need to send an API request. So I'm going to say GitHub, and API is equals to GitHub API. So we do not need a constructor in this one, right? And then I can make a request. So I'm going to say GitHub API dot fetch trending repositories. So everything is here. Let's do it for default. So yeah, let's run the code. So this is how we are getting a repository. So we can just create a new file. So I'm just going to say test. So just you paste everything over here, so you can see that in a text editor of how it looks. Anyways, let's go to the beginning. Okay. So we have this total count, we have this incomplete results, but what we are after is basically um, the data that we want to do. So the data is in this items, right? In this items key. So what we want to do is that instead of returning the complete data, we want to return items, right? Now if I run the code, we should have some items. So each item is now one repository with the information, with all of the information. So let me just quickly copy paste it. I'm not copy pasting it completely, but just for the first few ones it will be easy for us. So we have this ID, node ID, the name, the full name of the repository. Then we have, is it a private or not private? So a private repository is the one that cannot be accessed by everyone. You need to have some authorization to be able to access those. So that is provided by the person who is the owner of the repository. So if it's public, then everyone can access it. Then we have the owner, who is the owner, ID, their node ID, all this sort of information. But what we are basically after is these things: name, URL, stars, description. So we have this URL over here. I can simply say name. So you see we have this name over here. This is the name. Then we can see URL. So there's URL here as well. Then we can also see for other things, this is the URL. So it looks a bit messy the way it is structured, but all these values are available for one of each of the data rows that is returned. We also have stars we can have a look at. Or we have the owner. So we have all this sort of information that we can use. So now we are sure that okay, the API is returning the data. So what we want to do is that we do not want to print it. In this function, we just want to return this data so we can use it afterwards. So I'm going to say return data, and I'm not going to return the complete data. I'm just going to return the items because we are not concerned with any other one. So now what I need to do is that since I'm going to be saving a file, a CSV file, I'll quickly define a function that creates a CSV file. But before that, I see that I have not commented it out, not documented this function, so I can do that really quick. So I'm going to say fetches trend repository is data, right? And now here we were going to define a function to save a CSV, so we can say write to CSV. So for this one, what do we need? We need a list that will have the data, and then we're also going to give another parameter, that is the file name, the name for using which we want to save the file with. So quickly just document it. So I'm going to say write the repo information in a CSV file. Now we can start writing. So how do we do? First we need to create a file, so we say with open, and we need to we give here the file name because file name is provided to us in the function. We will provide this to the function, we will not make it um, static. And then we need to say okay, we need to open it in a W, in a right one, and then we will also say that new line is equals to this. So what this means is that whenever you go to a new line, don't make two breaks, just make one single break. Like this one, we did not put a new line in this one, so it skipped one line and then went on to another one. I do not want this empty line over here, I simply want the next one. So I'm saying whenever a new line starts, don't do anything, just put it into a new line. And one more thing that I'm going to give is that encoding is equals to UTF-8, right? So it will make sure that the encoding of the text is correct and we can open it different text editors. Now we say as CSV file. So now we have the CSV file. So first we need to create the object to write the CSV file. So I'm going to say CSV writer. Now we have the object, and here I need to define, okay, this is the CSV file in which I need to write. Now first I'm going to write the header. So I'm going to say write rows. So here we can also use a list, or we can provide the data by ourselves. In this one, as you can see, we did fields to save as a CSV file, and this was the header. But in this one, in our code, we do not have the fields to save, so we can simply write the header by ourselves in a list over here. So we know the first thing that we're going to write is the name, then URL, then stars. So I know, okay, these are going to be the same, so I'm just going to write in the same order. So I'm going to say name, then I'm going to say URL, then I'm going to say stars, and then I'm going to say description, then I'm going to say the owner, and then finally I'm going to say created at. So here we will have written the rows, and then I'm going to say writer dot write rows, and that will be the data that we get. Okay, so the data will be from this one, but we will process this data just to select the attributes that we need. But we know that we will put that into a list. So I'm just saying, okay, write the data in a list. Okay. So now I also want to create a menu that appears when a person starts the script. So I'm going to say define display menu and this. So the menu, we just need the languages that we want to display, like how many languages. So if you change the language over here, this function will change it automatically, right? So let's just quickly write the documentation for this one. So I'm going to say display the menu for selecting a programming language. Okay. Now this code might seem a bit difficult or a bit too advanced at times, but if you just follow this, break it down, you will find it much more easy to follow, and you can see that how we can combine different things and how we can make smaller pieces of code into a very proper project. So first we're going to say print, select programming language, right? So now I'm going to say we have a prompt to the user, okay, you need to select a programming language. Now what I'm going to do is that um, I've said that my programming languages would be in a list. So since it will be in a list, I can use the for loop according to that. But for the purpose of this one, I'm just going to define it before, so it is easier for you guys to follow. So I'm going to say languages equals to, let's put in some languages. Let's say we have Python, and then let's say we have JavaScript, and then let's say we have Java. We can have another language, Go, another one, let's say Ruby, and let's put another final one that would be Swift. So this is my languages over here, and this is what I'll send over here. So now what I'm going to do is for IDX, I'm going to use the enumerate. So I'm going to say language and in enumerate, and in this one I'm going to put the languages, and I'm going to start from 1. I'm not going to start from 0 because 1 2 3 4 I need it in the correct order. So now this one will simply print out the language to the user. So I can say print. Again, I'm going to use the F over here formatting. So here what it is, IDX. IDX is basically the counter that goes on besides in the loop. So it goes on from 1 2 3 4 5 6. So I just want to create a menu that says something like this. So it says 1.python, then 2 dot Java, then 3 dot. So this number 1 over here is this IDX, right? So I'm going to say 1 dot, then here I'm going to say the language that we're going to put. So I'm going to say lang, right? So now I have the language, and then once we have everything, we need to enter an option that will allow the user to quit. So you can see I'm making it much more dynamic. I'm not writing 6 values by myself. I'm even making this option list more dynamic using this one, right? So after this, I'm going to say that simply print the number is going to be greater than the length of languages. If there are 6 languages, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then the like for one is Python, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and at 7 will be the quit. So to get this 7, I'm going to say okay, it is great one more than the length uh, of this list of languages. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to say if here I'm going to say length languages, and we need to do +1, so I'm going to say +1. So I can also write it outside of this one, but just to give you a feel of how it actually feels to make proper programs, you need to compact the code down at times. So this is how you would make it compact, right? And then I need to put a dot over here, and here what I need to write, I need to write quit. So now we have the menu, we have this for display menu. We can simply check this one how it looks. So I'm just going to comment this one out for now. I'm just going to call this function display menu languages. I pass this one over here, and now I can simply run the code. So this is the menu we get: Python, JavaScript, anything over here. Now if I add something over here, um, let's say C++, and if I run the code, now C++ should be at the 7th option, and quit moves 1 down. So this is basically making this option dynamic. So I only need to change the language I need to add or remove here, and the menu will be updated accordingly, right? So let's just remove the CPP for now, and let's see what do we need to do next. So we already have created the necessary functions. Everything seems correct. Now what we need to do is that we need to create a workflow. So first we need to send in the request. So for the request, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to say, okay, these are my languages. But before that, let's quickly just put it over here so it looks neat. So I can also add a comment over here. Main workflow is written over here. So now we have the API, we have initialized this one, we have the languages, and now we do not need to fetch it right now. We need to fetch it when the user selects an option. So to create an endless menu, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use a while loop. So while true, this means that it will keep on running until and unless I exit out of the loop. So first things first, we need to display the menu. So I'm going to say display menu, and here we pass in the languages. So once the user has a menu, we want the choice of the user. So we can say choice is equals to input, and then we can say okay, enter your choice. Now I can also only allow the user to enter an integer variable because we want user to select a number based on this one, or we can also check that afterwards the user has entered. So let's do the second one. We'll also learn a new thing. So I'm going to say if choice dot is digit, that will check if the choice is a digit. It is not alphabet, so this will confirm that okay, it is a digit, right? I need to do something else over here. But Um, if the choice is not a digit, we need to say, okay, I'm just going to put it over here, put the else statement over here, and I need to say invalid. You made an invalid choice, so I need to say please select a valid option, right? And now in here, I can keep on writing the code. So I'm again going to choice and I'm going to convert it into an integer value. Now this will just check if it is an alphabet or not. It will not actually convert the input to an integer, so I need to do it over here by myself. So now I need to say if the number is between 1 and the final number over here, then I can select a value. If the user has entered 9, there is nothing on 9. So we need to give an error, right? So for that, I'm going to check if choice is 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 greater than or equal to 1 because we have 1 always over here. And if it is less than what? Less than the length of this languages plus 1. Plus 1 is for the quit option to be there. So I can say length languages and yeah. In fact, we can skip this length languages by itself because in this one, um, we are basically going to send the API request. If the user has entered um, 8, we do not need to send an API request. So here I'm just going to say send API request. But if the user has entered if choice equals to length of languages plus 1. If he has chosen the option that says quit, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to exit the code, exiting, and we can simply just break out of the loop. So now I've also have a condition that will break me out of the loop so the loop does not keeps on running indefinitely, right? And if the user has entered anything other than that, maybe anything after that, so again I'm going to say that is an invalid choice because that option does not exist. So I'm going to say invalid choice, please choose, or we can just copy paste this one over here. So if user enters any of these values, we will send an API request. If the user enters this, the number for quit, it will break the loop and it will quit. And if there's any other number or any other thing, then it will say invalid choice and will go over here again in the loop, right? So now let's get to the code where we are actually sending a request. So first I'm going to say what is the selected language. So the selected language, for example, the user enters 1, so that is at the 0th index. If the user enters 5, that is at the 4th index. Ruby is at the 4th index, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So whatever the number user enters, we need to get the one previous to that one. So if user enters 5, we need the value to be 4. So if we can say choice of the user minus 1 would get me this, the index of this one. So the choice of user is 4, minus 1 is 3. So that would get me the index of this one, that is 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, right? So here I'm going to then select the language that which the user has selected. So I'm going to say selected language is equals to, we will select it from the languages. So I'm going to say languages. Here we're going to select choice minus 1, right? So I'm going to say choice minus 1. So this will basically give me a number. So again the same thing, 5 minus 1, 4. So at 4 it is the one at the 4th index, 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4, right? So this way we will select the correct language that the user has selected. Now we can also add an option for the user to give us that how many of the top repositories he or she wants to get. Maybe they want to get only 5, maybe 10, maybe 15. So we can give this choice to the user, right? So what I can say is that number of repositories that you can have is equals to integer. So I'm not going to do this one over here again because this one was here just to let you know that we also have other options when we are taking an input. So I'm going to say input, and here what do we need to write? We need to write enter the number of repositories repositories to fetch. So user will enter the number over here. Um, we have the number, but we will give it to the function that fetches the data. So we will just keep it here for a while, and let's create some empty strings, empty data sets to hold our results. So the first thing I'm going to do is create repository. Oops. Repositories. So we have the data of repositories, that will be an empty one. So we will save it. Once we get the data, we will append to this one. We will start from the first page, and we give a value of per page 10. We can change this as well, but let's just keep 10 for now. This is basically based on here. Page is 1 and per page is 10, right? If the user has given a value of 20, so it will do 2 pages, right? So now once we have this one, we need to add the data into this one. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use a while loop while length of repositories data is less than number of repositories. So if the user has entered 10 repositories, and until and unless the length is less than this one, I'm going to be in the loop. So what I'm going to do is that for each of the data rows, I'm going to append that into this list. Okay, so I'm going to say repositories page is equals to GitHub API. This one we have created an API. I'm going to say GitHub API dot fetch the data, fetch trending repositories. So now we need to give it what language, page, and per page. So the language I'm going to say, what is the language? This one, selected language. Selected language, and we have the page and we have the per page over here. We can change these ones, so these ones will automatically change. Okay. So once we have that, we can say if the repository is empty, if there is nothing returned, like if no data is returned for anyone, we can say if not repositories page. If there is no data returned, we can simply print out print failed to fetch repositories, and then it will say exiting, and it will return, right? So it will simply return, or we can simply break as well. But if the data is there, then we need to say repositories data dot extend. We can also use the append method. We can also use the extend method. That doesn't really make a difference in this case. And we're going to say pages plus equals to 1. We go to the next page to get the next 20 of those, right? So once we have all of these in this one in the repositories, we have the information of each of those. Now we need to create this list so we can save it. We need to extract the required information from this one. Okay. So after the while loop, I'm going to say repositories is equals to in the list, and I'm going to create a list. In the first one, I'm going to create this one. I'm going to create a object of this class repository. So this basically is like this. Let's say repo is equals to repository, and in this one, what do we need to give from this repository? We need to extract this information. This one, name, URL, stars, description, and all these things. So what I'm going to say is that I need to see which one is there. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to basically use a here in this one I'm going to use a list comprehension. So repository for repo in repositories data, and here I'm just going to say the number of repositories, because for each page, let's say if the user has selected 15, so it will fetch 10 data rows per page. So it once over here it will have fetched 20 data rows, not 15, but I only want to keep the ones that the user mentioned. If the user wants 15, I do not want the last 5 to be present over here. This is why I'm just going to slice it. This is just list slicing, so the last ones are not there, right? So we stop before the last ones. So in here now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to put all the values over here. So the first thing we want is the name, right? So this basically is the constructor over here. This is me putting values for this constructor. So these needs to be in the same order. The first one is the name, then the second one that I have is the URL. So the URL that we're going to use is the HTML URL. Then the third one that we have is the star count. So the way that it is represented there is called stargazers count. And then the next we need is description. And once we have the description, we can see which one we need the next. We need the owner and the created at, right? So I'm going to say repo owner, and I'm also going to say login. So it gives me the username of the owner, and then finally the last one, the date time, is basically in a datetime format. We need to convert that into a string. So for that one, I'm going to say date time dot strptime. So if I show you created at over here, so you see this is basically a datetime format. This is not exactly a string. So we need to convert that into a string to be able to write that into a CSV file. So what we do is that first we use this function strptime to convert that into time. And here we need to give in the value. So I'm going to say repo, and we need to say created at, and afterwards what we need to do is that we need to define the format of this one. So once, let me just quickly write the format, and then I will tell you guys how it goes. And year, month, date, then we have the T, then we have the R, then we have the minute, then we have the seconds, and C, right? So this seems correct. Now if I paste this over here, So if I paste this over here, you can see this first one, per, um, pers- percentage y gives me the year, then we have the month, then we have the date. So the dashes in between, this dash represents this dash represents this dash. Now after the date we have t right away, so I'm entering t. Then we have the hours, so that is 16, 15, 28 hour minute second. Then finally we have this z over here, that is this ending one. So this is the format that we have. So we need to keep the same format, okay, on what the based on what we have in the data that is being returned to us. So once I've created this one, I've created a list now that has all the information of repositories, and now what I can do is that I can add that to a list. So I can say processed data. The data that has been processed is equals to repo dot to list, and this repo dot to list is basically what is this the function of this one to list. So it converts all these values into a list and gives it to us, right? So to list for repo in repositories in this repositories. Let me get rid of this one. We do not need this one. So now I have all the data in this process data list, right? Now I can simply write the data to a CSV. I can say write to CSV. So to write to a CSV, what I need is the data and the file name. So the data that I'm going to give is simply the process data that we have. For the file name, I want to make it dynamic. So what I'm going to do is that again, I'm going to say trending underscore here. I want to put in the language that the user selected. So the file name is easier to read. Trending, if it is Python, so it will say trending Python repositories and then a CSV extension. You do not need to forget the extension. So now we can also give a message to the user that it has been done. So we can say print uh, the data for the selected repo. We can even display the repo over here. We can say for the selected repository, selected language is written to what? Is written to this file. Is written to this file, right? So now seems like that we have everything over here. We have written the file as well. You can simply check the code if there is something missing. Doesn't seem like it. Everything seems okay. So now we can simply just save it, run the code one more time. Now we have the value. Let's say we want to check for Python. I entered Python. Number of repositories. I want to fetch 5 repositories. So it says the data for the selected repo Python is written to this file, right? So we should have this file over here, trending Python repositories. And we have this public APIs, a collective list of free APIs, system design, awesome Python, all these things. Let's just quickly check this one on the right CSV. So I think we need to do right rows, or should it be right row? So I think we can simply do this one. We do not need this, we do not need this. I'll delete, save it. Okay. So I'm just going to quit for now. Run the code again. Python 5. So it says that it has been saved. So now we have the name. This is the name of the repository. This is the URL using which we can visit. Then is the stars. It has this many stars. This is the description, a collective list of free APIs, owner and everything. We can even copy this one, go to GitHub, paste it. So this is the repository it told us about. You see it has this many stars. So what this repository basically is about, that it is a public repository where someone has mentioned all free APIs that we have available. This would be cool to look on, right? You can maybe find some some API for your next project for science, programming, open data transportation, animals. So there's a lot of APIs. There's even some information about that. Does it require an authentication, HTTPS, and this course thing? So maybe you can visit this one. So this is how we have this. Now I just want to enter a space over here. Now I will quit and let's just test it out for a few more. So let's run the code. Let's say I want to go for Ruby this time. So I say 5. I want to fetch 20 repositories. So now we have it saved. Trending Ruby repositories, Rails, JS, this. Maybe we can try for this one. Copy this, paste it over here. So this is the language over here. See, Ruby. This one, let's see the language. It is Python. Most of the majority of it is in Python. The majority is Ruby. It has some information. This repository. This is the person who has created this repository. We can use this one. We can even go back and let's try for, let's say, JavaScript. I want the first 12 most popular ones. So we have this JavaScript. We have the 12 um, data rows over here, right? This. So this is how you can basically create a project. So that was all in this lecture. We learned how to create a basic mini project. This was sort of an exciting project. This is not an everyday project. So what I would like for you to do is that find these interesting projects, go visit different repositories on GitHub, try to be innovative in your projects, try to do different ones so you can learn more and you can get more knowledge. So that brings the course to the end. So hopefully you would have learned a lot about Python and now you would be able to create your own Python scripts for different purposes. And that will be all. Goodbye.